Hello everybody, I'd like to welcome you to FantasyCon's 2015 panel discussion on the topic of creating believable fantasy worlds. We have with us John Lawrence, Michelle Lowe, Emma, Ataska Brothers and Mary Walding. So I'd like to start Waldering. I'd like to start this panel discussion off by asking each author to talk about what they do, their genres, and from there we will begin our topic, and hopefully you'll learn a great deal. John, could you please tell everybody what you do, what genre you do, and the type of books you write?
I write under the pen name of J. Lawrence, and my genre is epic fantasy adventure. As well, I was also working on a dystopia, but the only thing I've ever published is all epic fantasy. And I write the Sagas of Dagon. First two books are out. Third is due 6 months or so. We'll see how it goes. So epic fantasy for me.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Michelle Lowe, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Michelle Lowe. I'm a science fiction fantasy writer. I'm an author of several published novels. I'm a mother of two beautiful, beautiful little girls. I paint. I own a cat. I'm 36. I'm a Atlanta, Georgia native, former film projectionist, and now I live in California.
Wicked. Emma, you're very late at night. You're in Paris, I believe, or in France. Sorry, not Paris. You're in France. So could you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, I'm a paranormal romance author. I'm living in southwest France in the Dordogne. I have 3 published novels and a short story out at the moment, but I've also written quite a lot online on Wattpad, where I'm known as La Dame Blanche. And the latest one is The Dark Prince, which is the first in the series about some very dangerous, sexy fairies.
Wicked. I'm going to look it up. Ataska Brothers, how are you today? Could you please tell us about what you do? Hi.
My name is Ataska Brothers. I was born and raised in Russia, and now I live in Colorado. I write dark fantasy with romantic elements, strong romantic elements. And my first novel, The Soul of a Stillborn, was picked by Fantasy Works Publishing, and I'm waiting right now for a release date.
Brilliant. And our last panelist is Mary. Could you please tell us what books you write, the genre that you write in, please?
Okay, that's a tough one because I write fantasy, but it seems to be kind of multi-hat fantasy because it's got elements of paranormal and epic, and some historical and some romance, but so I'm calling it multi-hat. It's also metaphysical fantasy. It's a series I'm working on that I have 2 of maybe 6 books out already. It's called Children of Stone. I write under my own name. And I hope to get the 3rd book out next year. I'm trying to do 1 a year.
Brilliant. I try to do the same. It's about trying to finish what you start, isn't it? My name's Carol March. I write under the pen name of Ellen May Franklin. I'm currently working on a series called the Enia series, and I'm an epic fantasy writer. I dabble in bits and pieces, a little bit of the dark, a little bit of the high fantasy, the low fantasy, that's about it. I live in Australia, by the way, with this strong accent, and I'm your moderator for this panel discussion. So I'm about to hit it off, and I'm going to ask everybody some questions about the topic of creating believable fantasy worlds. I would like to start with Michelle, please. I'd just like to ask you this question. In many ways, the world you build for your story will be a character in itself. Do you agree with this statement? And if you do, what's your opinion on that? Do you feel that the realm that you build, or the world, has its own characteristics, and how important is that? And if so, why?
I totally agree. You should have, if you're making up a whole new world, it should have all kinds of different elements to it. If it's a because it has to be as organic too if you want the readers to actually be involved into this world that you have created. If it's a city setting, you gotta know your building structures, your laws, the types of currency, know the people and the clothes that they wear, their customs, their pets, languages they speak, the religions, etc. And you want to also make sure that they interact with this world seamlessly as you would in your own atmosphere, and tell about this new world as the characters are going through it, instead of trying to cram a long description of this new world in one long description to allow your readers to ease into this new territory.
Makes a lot of sense, and I totally agree with that as well. John, could you tell us, making maps, do maps make a difference in world building? And if so, do they bring a certain credibility to the story that you're writing and to the world itself that's been created?
Absolutely. I love maps. Every time I pick up a book in the fantasy genre, I'm looking for the map. I love maps. I'm addicted to maps. The cooler the map, the cooler the book, as far as I'm concerned with. And absolutely they do. My first book starts in a certain corner of a very, very big world called Earth, right? And I haven't left one little corner. I'm still there. So one day a fan says, I know there's more books coming because that's a big map. And that's cool. She got it. That was the whole purpose behind not just putting a small map of where we were at just for that, that one book in there. You want them to know, hey, this is a whole world. And kind of goes back to what Michelle was saying is, it has to be all involved. You have societies and kingdoms and descriptions, and what better description than a map? It's absolutely, yeah. I think it's not only nostalgic and cool feeling, but it's absolutely imperative. If you're doing epic fantasy and you're going to travel the world, let them see. Absolutely.
Big time. I think it's very important when you are doing a series that perhaps there is a map involved, so that people, when they travel, just not mentally, but visually, they can actually touch base with what you've created. They can see the line of mountains, or they can see that certain river, and it gives them a focus point all the time of where they're at in that story by using the map. What do you feel about that, Emma? I can see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with maps because personally I can't read them, and my geography is very poor. But I do agree. I never look at the maps in books. I'm sorry, because I'm not very good at geography reading, as I say, but I do agree. I think it does add an element of believability, of solidity to any fantasy realm. I think it's very, very important. And the trouble is, you have to get it right, and it's one. The Feylands that I've created in my book are generally placed over what is Europe in our world, so that the Fey themselves are Europeans, and then I'm going to be bringing in other cultures as I sort of broaden the books out into other parts of the world. But to do that, I am actually having to spend some considerable time building a map. Which is, I have to confess, my least favourite part of what I'm doing, because I just want to do the writing. I don't want to do geography, but it really does need to be done.
I'm in agreement with this series. I'm working on book 4, and I need a map, and I'm not a cartographer. I don't have any skills in map making, but like John, maps are a critical point as far as I'm concerned in any fantasy book, any fantasy book, but in particular series, and particularly epic fantasy. And so I've roped in my other half to be my map builder, and he's been furiously researching, and every now and then I hear a few curses with my name mixed in that passed around the room. So, Itasca, what do you think about map building? What's your view of its of it being crucial or not crucial in fantasy?
My task is simpler because my setting is our world, realistic world.
Okay. Yes.
So it's creating an atmospheric setting for me. That's what matters the most. And because my first novel is set in a Russian village, I know it intimately because that's where I spent every summer of my childhood. And I know where abandoned cemetery is. I know where the old well is. So I do have to draw the setting of the house to make sure I know how where the bedrooms are located. I have several different characters visiting where the garden is, where the river is, how far my characters can get on foot or on a bicycle. But I do not need large map of a country.
Okay, interesting. All right. Mary, can I ask you a question, please?
Yes.
Have you or do you read about other people's worlds to gain inspiration for the world which you may be building? And if you have done that, has that helped in any way for you to establish your own fantasy world?
Well, actually, it's a little weird because I'm an art historian, or was, and my world is actually the ancient world of ancient Egypt, and so I do a lot of actual historical work and researching in that way, but it's partly speculative history, partly fantasy, and what I do is I just read some of the ancient texts, that the translations of them, that is, and I find out where the holes are.
Yep.
Like, and I go, well, suppose this happened, and then that's where I go. So I actually read Herodotus, or things like that.
Okay.
I guess if I was doing a different era, I would probably read things that were pertinent to that era, or if I was doing a total fantasy world.
Yep.
Well, I don't know. I haven't done a total fantasy world yet.
Okay. So, John, maybe I'll ask you that particular question. Have you read any books from other authors that has helped you create a world? And I suppose this question does sort of come to people who are actually inventing new worlds from, with inside here. So have you had any influences?
I think it's impossible not to be influenced to some extent, in my particular fantasy genre, epic fantasy, it does have a lot of similar feels. You're going to have dragons and magic and swords. It's usually some sort of medieval, type of world, whether it's here or another place. So it kind of, for me, it's really more about enjoying the other authors' worlds and that process, seeing how well they've been able to pull that off. To me, that's exciting. I was a fan a long time before I ever thought about writing. So for me, just the idea of seeing somebody do it really well is a huge turn on. I'm a super geek. I do a little, happy dance when it's a great book. For me, it's inspiring, but not so much the specifics as the techniques. I love the idea, like Michelle was saying, of people feeling that world, experiencing that world in little teeny driblets at a time. I really love that. And if an author can do that and give me that, I'm hooked for life, So, I would say I draw a lot of inspiration, but it's just general inspiration. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Michelle, I'm going to read out a statement, and could you give me your thoughts on this, please?
I'll try.
Okay, thank you. Most fantasy involves magic, and we should ask the question as to whether or not a fantasy world should follow a system. For instance, is it believable that characters can suddenly develop new abilities or venture outside of this system, even though it's fantasy? What do you think about this?
Well, I guess it depends if you want to make it if you want to make it realistic. That seems to be more of what is popular now, is making things more realistic instead of just poof, I have this new ability, but you can have it to where it was always inside that person and they just now discovered it. That would make sense. I like
Yes,
that idea.
yes. But you should mention that, though, in your writing, that ability,
Exactly.
that ability was latent. But yeah, but do you agree that you can't sort of be halfway through a book and a character all of a sudden just launches off into the sky and starts flying, and it's never ever been mentioned before? So that kind of crushes that believable element of world building.
Yeah. Unless you're giving out little hints throughout the book,
Yeah.
just dotting like little, like this character just kind of started floating, and then or something like that, and then you can have it to like at an end of a chapter that this character took off,
Yes.
But as long just throwing it in there, yeah, that totally derails the whole story altogether. But if you, like I said, if you dot it with little snippets of clues that this person does have this ability, then that would work.
Yeah. What's your view on that statement, Emma?
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. I think the reader sort of is in a position, as an author, you're in a position of trust with the reader. If they're spending their time actually putting their time into reading your words and buying into the world that you're creating, you have to stay within certain rules, and obviously you build those rules as you're going along. You tell them what the rules are, but you then can't say, actually, no, I'm tearing up these rules, I'm doing something totally against everything I've just told you, without putting some kind of, but this has happened because, there's got to be, it could be a big reveal or something, but there has to be some sort of structure, there has to be some sort of realistic reason why this is happening, and that has to be visible within the writing that's gone previously. Otherwise, why should the reader continue to believe what you're telling them? Because you could pull up any sort of, how can they believe in your plot and where you're going? If you can just at the end say, oh, it was all a dream, Bobby Ewing was in the that just doesn't work.
So basically, even though we are writing fantasy, we still need to have boundaries. We still need to write by rules to make these worlds believable.
Absolutely.
What do you think, Mary?
Yeah, I think that you do have to have rules, or the reader's going to go like, oh, where did that come from? I know with mine, I have talents develop over time, because there's an event in my character's life, all of them, and then they don't have magical powers at the beginning when the event happens. They learn things through contact with other characters. They develop them. Sometimes their abilities surprise them when they suddenly realize they can do something they didn't know about before. But there's always hints. There is a progression. There's a certain boundary that you have to keep it to where the reader isn't going to just suddenly fall into disbelief. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's very, very critical. Okay, Itasca, I'm going to throw a new question at you. I'm going to ask you, please, when you begin a new story, do you take into account each element that you place into your fantasy world as to whether or not it will help move the story along that you are creating? So, for instance, does creating a wide-ranging river in the somewhere in your story, does that help develop any characters, or is it just something that you've added because you've worked really hard on it and it means nothing to the book? So in your world building, do you think that each element that you create and place in that book, is that a very, very important thing to do to make a world believable in fantasy?
It's funny that you mentioned the river, because I have a river and it's a huge element of the story, and I'm using it even on the cover of the novel. And in the world building, I'm using real elements. Like I said, I like wells, I like river, I like birch groves. The moon is rising above the birch grove cemeteries. And I like the kind of novels where a group of students are sent into a faraway cabin. So basically that's my setting. I'm sending a group of American students into a Russian village and see what's going to happen. And the setting is very familiar to me. So, of course, I'm using everything from the house to the flowers native to Russia, plants, wonderful sky. So, yes.
Okay. And John, what do you think on that question?
I get bored really easily, and although I like a lot of description with things when I'm reading, I tend to throw things away really fast. I don't know. Maybe it's just an American thing. I'm sorry. I apologize. I want to pull up to McDonald's. I want my burger now. So when it's just what it is. When I'm reading and something doesn't seem like it has value to the story to me, I chuck it. Sometimes I'll even chuck the book. I just don't like the idea of description for no reason. If it doesn't drive the plot, if it doesn't move my character forward, if it doesn't bring this book a little bit closer to, the conclusion, I don't want to read that chapter. You can save it. And that's exactly how I write. It's a big world. There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of great stuff. But you know what? I don't mind walking by this or that and mentioning, it's a castle. We don't need to talk about it. It's a castle. If it doesn't have anything to do with what's happening with the story, I'm not going to talk about it. I don't want to read about it. I don't want to know about it. But if it has something to do with my characters, if it is an obstacle, if it is something that's going to cause them to grow and learn and change and be challenged, then we're going to get serious about it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to showcase it. We're going to make it special. But other than that, I lose patience.
Okay. So Emma, what do you?
I kind of agree and disagree, and maybe this is a difference between sort of a male-female thing. I don't know. I totally do not enjoy gratuitous description that goes on for pages. That's just it's self-indulgent on the part of the author.
Just waffling.
Very boring. But at the same time, I do think there is something to be said for creating an atmosphere and creating a setting that is an ambient setting for whatever it is, whether it be a romantic setting or a dangerous setting. That there needs some description of the place in which these people are passing through, inhabiting, looking at, whatever. I want to know what it is they're experiencing. I think I'm definitely sort of, I hear what John's saying, and I think he's absolutely right. At the same time, I want some, I want to know, I want to know what the place looks like and smells like, and I want to touch it, taste it, feel it, that I want all of those sensory sort of elements to the story.
I'm a little bit with you on that, I think, Emma, even though I've got lots of different things, like I've got rivers and mountains and swamps, and it goes on and on and on because it's so goddamn epic. But when I come across those things, I try extremely hard to keep descriptions of particular landscaping into a paragraph, or maybe two, depending on what the value it holds for those characters and for the plot itself. I won't waffle on in prose, but I do think that just because maybe I might like the idea of having this massive big mountain that reaches the clouds, and I think in my head, I've really got to put something like that in my book. But if I do, will it benefit the characters, the reader, the story in any way? If I can't justify having that big scary mountain there, that there's no point in me even thinking about it. You know?
I think if it's adding to your description, if the big scary mountain is giving them a feeling of oppression or whatever, then it has value.
Yes, but if it doesn't, then you just can't do it because you want to do it. Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree. Okay, Michelle, how much research do you feel that's necessary in creating fantasy worlds? For example, if you're writing a story in high fantasy and it's steeped in Celtic legends, is it essential to write in the way that recalls the language of the fairy tales and the legends that are associated with Celtic myths?
Well, if you're writing in, let's say, if you're writing in this world, an alternate world, but this world, then you should definitely do your research. Know the customs and rituals, and you can make, it's fantasy, you can make it up too. But I think research is very important. I use a lot of research in almost every book I've done, and it kind of puts more realism into your fantasy, which connects the reader more to your book, I feel.
And that helps to build a believable fantasy world. Do you agree? Do you agree, Mary, on that?
Yes, I do. I as I said, I'm a research addict. I'm so glad we have an internet now. The last time I was writing, when I was a kid, we had to go to the library and look those things up. And so I'm just, research is extremely important. I do it all the time. If I'm stuck, I actually get on the internet and I talk to people who might be versed in a particular thing and customs. And that way when I do the fantasy part of it, it makes it believable to the reader. So, like you were saying, I think it is very important. I'm kind of bobbling over here.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I would be nowhere without research. And I think that's one thing I really liked with the authors that I grew up with, such as like Herman Melville was a favorite. And unfortunately, you can do too much. So actually going back to the other question that you had, my challenge is cutting down what I write, because I'll just sit down and I'll go and I'll think of things in like 400-page bites, and I'll just go, there it is. Now I have to find something to cut it down so that people will actually want to read it, but the research helps.
Fair call. Itasca, could you please tell us what challenges have you found when you are creating believable fantasy worlds?
The first novel I didn't have any trouble because, like I said, it was a realistic setting which I knew intimately, and my paranormal element is just a supernatural phenomena. My main character, my heroine, was stillborn, resurrected by a supernatural entity, and basically the question was, if your every breath, every motion, every desire is generated by paranormal forces, can you call yourself human? And the setting was second main character of the novel. The sequel is set in New England, and right now I am buried in research. I've been to New England before, but it was a long time ago, and it was before digital photography. So that's my current research right now, to create new realistic world, which I don't know that intimately, but I want the feeling, I want the smells, I want the plants, and then I can add supernatural element into it.
So it is fairly important research, no matter what we do as far as subgenres for fantasy. Research is quite important. I mean, it's one thing to write a book and say that the sky is orange and the ground is purple, and it's got 8-foot dogs running around. I mean, no one's going to believe that unless you're a child. So writing children's books, I suppose there's a slight exception to that. But I think that's a bit of a stretch. So research, Michelle, what do you think on the word for research and any challenges that you have in creating your fantasy worlds? Talk to us about that.
I think it goes to what Mary was saying. Sometimes I over-research and I end up cutting a lot of, which, you know, when you're a writer, that's what you do anyway. But for me, it's just over-researching, putting so much in, and then just going back and taking it out. But that's editing.
Mm-hmm.
Dreaded editing.
That's true.
Oh yeah, dreaded.
It is dreaded.
Challenges, John. What do you face when you build fantasy worlds?
Oh my! Well, I see my world is from start to finish my own creation. So that in itself it's a huge uphill battle to get it all down and consistent. That's a big tall order. You know, it's for me, that's the hardest part, is getting it all. I don't like the idea of winging it along the way. I want to know, you know, what type of government this particular kingdom has and where they're located and approximately the population. What are they doing? So for me, the organization to get started is a big thing. And then once that's done, then it's easy for me to weave through the framework of all of that. But the biggest hurdle is all of the upfront planning. You know, there's nothing to research. I can't go in a book and find out about the world that I'm creating. I have a lot of tie-in elements that help you feel as though it's familiar. You know, because you can't be 100% alien. You kind of lose track of it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have some things that pull you from this world into that world, and those things I do research and it helps, but it's tough. It's tough because it's so big. That for me is the big thing. You know,
I have a similar sort of challenge because my world, Tarkinia, is totally from the inside coming out, so to speak. I can virtually do whatever I like, but I keep in mind that if I'm going to write, let's say, geography is a really big thing for me. If I'm going to enter into a swampland, for instance, I like to do as much research as I can about the environment, the landscape of a swampland, the creatures that live there, the type of plants, etc., and then try and base that part of my world with fact, to shore it up with fact, so that when people are reading the books, that they're not just going, oh, you've got to be kidding me. You know, there's no desert in the swampland, there's no sand. So, you know, you have to be very, very careful, I think, about making sure your framework is as real and as believable as it can be. Okay, what I think I do, we've actually been speaking for quite a while. We've answered a lot of questions. I just think that maybe we should do a little bit of a closing. And by doing that, I might ask each of you to, in saying goodbye, to just also speak about any difficulties that you may have in writing fantasy worlds, anything that you enjoy, anything that, I don't know, that you may think that you've expected and you've come across, the unexpected, of course. And then from there, we'll close down this panel and say goodbye to everybody. So I'm going to go backwards this time. I'm going to start with Mary. So, Mary, if you would just like to sort of end your session with us by just giving a bit of a general talk about your view on creating believable fantasy worlds and sharing with everybody your thoughts.
Believable fantasy worlds, that's what the question was?
Yes. What do you find challenging and what do you like?
Oh, okay. Well, what I like about creating the fantasy worlds is I think with the one I'm writing right now, and I guess others that I had never published, is again bringing a sense of enjoyable history, but putting enough speculation and fantasy in it that a reader learns something about a particular time period and goes, I wonder what it would be like to travel through time, go there. I wonder if this is real. A challenge, too, is, for me, the challenging is always editing. But I said that before. I was trying to not say too much or say something, as John was saying, that's irrelevant to the progress of the story. But it's a process. I think and it is fun. I've always written, but I'm kind of new to the publishing thing. Okay, I guess that's really all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Emma, what do you like about creating fantasy worlds or don't like? And would you like to share your thoughts with our viewers today?
Sure. I think I like the freedom of it. There is a historical element to my work in as much as the Fey lands that I've created. The premise is that humankind and the Fey world actually coexisted together. The gates between the worlds were open up until the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in Europe, at which time our world became so toxic that the Fae withdrew and closed the gates and nobody was allowed to come through any longer. And so the Fae world that I've created is kind of stuck in what we in the UK would call Regency England. It's very heavily influenced by that period. There's no cars, there's no electricity, the fashion, the morals, the way that people interact with each other, and the way that women are treated is all very much of that era. But the reason that I like it in a fantasy world is that I'm not completely bound by historical events. It's my world. There is this Regency feel to the world that I've created, but it's under my terms. So there's research to be done, but I don't have to stick to it to the letter. I think it's the balance between getting enough information that's truthful and actually does adhere to historical events and a real true world, and then having the sort of the enjoyable bit of actually adding the frills and saying that this is my take on it.
Oh, lovely. Tasca, what do you like or don't like about creating fantasy worlds?
Gosh, I enjoyed listening to this panel so much because it seems like everyone has a different process, and I realized, you just sit and type and you don't think about it how you actually create it. It's just the way you do. And this is so different the way John doesn't want description, and you started telling us about how you create a swamp and animals and it's natural. And, oh my God, that's what I do. To me, it's a natural world that I'm creating, which is part of fantasy. So that's what I really, really like today to listen how you guys do that.
Oh, fantastic. Michelle, what do you like or don't like about creating fantasy worlds?
Well, I completely agree with Emma. I was actually going to say that it's the freedom of creating this whole world, and also what I don't like is the finding that balance between research and what to put in and what not to put in. I don't know. It's just there's just so much to like and dislike about it. But I think I enjoy creating more than actually not creating.
Yeah, I understand that. John?
Well, I already kind of touched on the part of the creating the world that I didn't like. But you know what I have really come to love is my characters. I have fallen in love with so many of these characters. I feel so guilty for hurting them so bad, but
Sorry, I can relate to that.
Yes, right.
No, I love it.
Chapter is,
you have to die. You have to die. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
I hate doing it, but you have to die. Yeah.
You gotta go.
Yeah.
but every single chapter for me is written in a different point of view. It's one of the things I do. It may be a little confusing and hard to follow at times, but once you get up to speed, you really get bought into each individual character. And now that we're going about and narrating the books, I'm self-narrating all the books. I'm doing it all in character. I'm finding that these people are my very best friends and my worst enemies. Some of them I absolutely detest and hate, and some of them I absolutely love. So for me, the thing I really am enjoying the most about this is watching my characters experience this world that I've created. And then as a follow-up to that, the fans, the people that write in and are as excited about your heroine or, your hero, or hates your villain just as much as you do. Like, that to me is awesome. I can't get enough of it. I'm completely addicted. And I didn't think that I would enjoy that part because I'm a bit adventurous and I like the blood and guts and the mayhem and the magic. But for me, it's really coming down to people. I am really enjoying everything about this and the people that I'm interacting with, real or not.
Cool. I do actually have one more little question. I was going to close off, but I do have to have this one little question. So I'll just get a quick yes or a quick no with a little bit of explanation. So I'm going to ask each of you. Emma, do you believe that it is more important to get it right in comparison to other genres when you are creating your world, when you're setting your world for your story? Is it more important to get it right in comparison to other genres because it is fantasy and we need to make it believable for readers?
Yeah, I think it's very important that you are clear in what your world is representing, and that you are unique. I would hope that I have a voice which is totally my own and doesn't sound like anybody else, and that I have a world which is nothing like anybody else has created. So in as much as getting it right, I think, yeah, it has to be truthful. It has to stand up within the rules that I've created. And I don't think, if I was taking a bit from this author and a bit from that author and a bit, in thinking that, I'll take all the best bits of theirs and sort of stitch it all together, that's never going to work. It has to be something that you've created organically yourself, and you have to be 100% certain and believe in yourself, in what you're creating. Because if you don't totally know and understand and believe that this world, is creatable, then the reader just won't buy it.
So I can see a few shaking heads of yes then. Michelle, what do you think about that? Do you think it is more important for a fantasy writer to get it right in comparison to other genres when creating worlds? Because it is fantasy and it needs to be believable to the readers. Because if the story does not feel grounded, the reader will more easily suspend the disbelief for fantastical occurrences of this world. So what do you think?
Well, there should definitely be a certain balance and a flow that goes in with your story. It should always stay consistent from the beginning to end. Don't veer off into some other voice that doesn't even belong into your story. Always stay true to that particular story. Even if you're taking something from your own story that's from another book, don't throw it into that current one, or you will throw off your reader and hopefully not, but you could lose them.
Yeah, true. Taska, do you think it's more important as a fantasy writer to make sure that your world is believable in comparison to the other genres? For instance, let's just say that we're talking, I don't know.
Romance.
Yeah, erotica, for instance. Let's just say, as an erotica writer, well, I'm not one, thank God. But let's just say that as a fantasy writer, our worlds need to be alert, I suppose, and we need to be a little bit more sure of what we do to make our worlds believable. What do you think?
To me, did I deliver this atmosphere? Am I strong enough as a writer to show my reader this pre-dawn garden?
Yes.
Does my reader feel it the way I feel it? Does my reader smell it? Does he or she sees it? The fact that my heroine finds a horrific artifact which looks like mummified finger, that's part of the fantasy. But the atmosphere itself, I don't think it matters which genre it is, as long as I, as a writer, deliver it.
Okay. Yep. Fair enough. Which is very similar to Mary. That's how you feel, isn't it? That you know.
It has to be believable.
Yes.
I think, with the exception maybe of historical, like straight historical romance, which is a little harder. As a matter of fact, I misclassed mine as historical when I first put it out there, and got fairly well jumped on by people who knew more about the era that I was writing about.
Yeah, you have to be so factual, don't you? If you're going to include.
Right. But with that, other than that, I think you still have to follow the rules and make it believable.
Okay.
And because fantasy can't be too fantastic, or you're gonna lose your reader.
Yes, they'll just get lost in that and they won't be grounded enough to follow the story through. There's got to be continuity no matter what you write from beginning to end if you're going to create a world. Well, listen, people, I think we need to tie it up. We've been talking now for probably close on an hour, so we've gone a little bit over time, but I've really enjoyed myself here listening to everybody. So I'd just like everyone to do a little bit of a farewell. And I'll just mention you by name, and you can just say goodbye, because you are immortalised now. You're on the web. It will never go away. You're there. Okay. So, Emma, would you like to say goodbye from France?
I would, yeah. It's nearly 1 o'clock here, so I will in the morning. And as my full name isn't up there, and I can't remember if I said it at the beginning, no. I'm Emma V. Leach, Emma V. Leach. I've really had a good time talking to everyone here this evening, and hope to do it again someday. So bye.
Fantastic. Mary.
Okay. Had a great time. I'm really glad that I managed to get everything downloaded in the nick of time here.
Yeah, it was close.
It was really worrying. Okay. Anyway, now I have to go get supper that I was going to make about an hour ago. Anyway, thank you very much for having me, and hope to do this again.
Fantastic. Well,
bye.
Bye. Ataska, a big farewell from you.
I'm Ataska Brothers. My first novel, The Soul of a Stillborn, is coming up hopefully this year. It snowed this morning in Colorado, and thank you so much for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you. And Michelle Lowe.
Well, my name is Michelle Lowe, and I had such a great time with all of you guys here today. Thanks for having me, and, well, farewell.
All right. And John, our last panelist, the only male on our gaggle of women. Would you like to say goodbye to everybody?
I'm very pleased to be so. Thank you for inviting me, ladies. I'm very honored to take part of the panel, and it was a lot of fun. I learned something, actually. I really enjoyed it. And Jay Lawrence, signing out from Buffalo, New York. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and I'd like to say goodbye. I'm Carol March, writing under the name of Ellen May Franklin. I'm from Adelaide, Australia. It is now my morning to Emma's very late night and everyone else's afternoon. And I'd just like to sign off on behalf of FantasyCon 2015 for our discussion on the topic of creating believable fantasy worlds. And I'm about to hit the stop recording button, and everyone's just going to be frozen for a very brief time as it ends. Goodbye. See you later, everybody. Hey. Bye. Hey, Mary. Okay. Bye. Bye.
It's too long.
I can't hold it anymore.
All those smiles.